Cooper.
And I'm Ebony Williams.
And we wanted to come on and sort of revisit our thoughts about the movies that we've discussed already, because we started this thing and didn't quite know what we were doing, and now we're starting to get an idea. That's what it feels like for me anyway.
Yeah. I was thinking about this whole idea of white iron Barbie. What did we end up calling it? White Claw? What is it?
It was okay, wait. It was the White Iron Barb.
The white iron Barbie. So when we last met, you talked about how your idea about why White Claw wasn't nominated for any Academy Awards, and that's because Hollywood doesn't want to hear a story like this. We don't want to critique masculinity in this way. So I was thinking, what makes the critique in Barbie more palatable than the critique in White Claw, Iron Claw, Iron Claw?
I'm glad you asked that, because that's one of the first things I ask myself when I have a crazy thought like that. And I think if we were able to accept the premise, that you just outlined, I think it is that we are comfortable putting the onus of liberation on the minoritized, rather than looking to the source of who benefits. So examining the top part of patriarchy and masculinity is a little less comfortable for us than these narratives of lean in, overcome, boss bitch, those kinds of things. Same thing with like black girl magic. Like, I love those things, and I think that if they're empowering to folks, then that's great. But I also want soft white man cries silently in the corner, because if we don't have them together, then we've got just, what happens. I'm sure you have seen this, probably experienced it, when the person in the room whose voice is not seen as equal to others, they start to try to raise their voice and intervene and to get themselves in there. That just makes the other voices shout down louder. We're just more comfortable. We, as in society, are more comfortable putting the effort of liberation and equality on the minoritized to work harder than any kind of coalition between those who benefit as well.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. So it's one thing for women to say to men, toxic masculinity is an issue. It's another thing for men, and it's another thing for men to say to men, toxic masculinity is an issue.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we respect insiders more than we do. I mean, and I want to say respect. I won't say respect, but maybe even value the opinion of insiders.
Say whatever feels right to you,
Yeah. But there's a value there. You're an insider. You know this experience the way I do. So if you say this, maybe I might hear it differently than someone who may not identify.
Well, and this comes from this interaction I had, viewers and listeners. I teach diversity and inclusion workshops and ally development and things like that professionally. And I had an interaction on Twitter once that informed a section that I do now in my allyship curriculum. There was a discussion happening on Twitter about white-splaining, which is a portmanteau of white and explaining. So similar to how we have mansplaining, white-splaining is when a white person explains to a person of color that they're experiencing racism. It is often how the baby steps of or nascent allyship actually manifests. It's white folks turning to black folks and going, "You gonna do something about that? That's racism." And yada yada. They mean well, but it's not. It doesn't work. That's not what we're talking about. It isn't what we meant. So on Twitter, I was engaging with this conversation, and this guy said, when I explained that, he said, "Well, that's just being a good ally." Explaining to my black friend that she's being discriminated against. I said, no, she doesn't need you to explain that to her. And even if she did, how is you explaining it to her helping the situation? How are you intervening? Where are you interrupting? And he said, oh, and I said, what being a good ally would be is using your whiteness, which is the center of the thing here, to explain to the person doing the discriminating that they are discriminating. He said, but that would just make me an asshole. And I was like, okay, so you do not see these two things as equal. I was like, you don't see your friend who's being discriminated against as equal to you. You can explain down to her, but you can't speak to your peer about something that they're doing. And so that interaction just blew my mind. It haunts me to this day. Because what's at risk for him?
Nothing.
Except.
You think there is something at risk?
For him?
Yeah.
What's.
How he's seen by his peer.
Exactly.
The person he considers his peer.
Right.
Which also says then the person you consider your friend who's being discriminated, you don't see as your peer. Like you said, you don't see as equal to you.
What he is afraid of, which is a better way to phrase what's at stake, I guess, is losing access to that power. He's afraid of winding up in a place similar to where his friend who's being discriminated against is. So he's not willing to risk his actual status. Okay? So that's what that's where the evil plan, conspiracy theory stuff, like, I feel like I should put on a tinfoil hat when I talk about this stuff or whatever, but I also think I'm right.
I mean, I don't think you're wrong. I mean,
and becoming a white man has not changed my mind. So I don't know. When I'm looking at movies about gender and things like that, or race or anything, I'm always looking for whether they're skirting that issue or, if they're looking at it at all.
Yeah. So let's talk about it then. We're getting into it.
Yeah.
Does Barbie and Iron Claw, do they skirt that issue?
I do not believe either of them skirts it.
Okay.
I believe the Iron Claw makes it. I think the Iron Claw is the braver film. I think that it looks more directly at the viewer and says, this is what we're here to say. Barbie uses camp. It's not that Barbie doesn't have a heavy lift or anything like that. It really does. But it's because also Barbie has to live in this space of exactly what Sasha was talking about with, we don't like Barbie as a culture either because we're a misogynist culture. We'll find any reason to discount women or anything feminized.
I have been thinking about the Iron Claw. When you and I talked last, we talked about how the father's authority was never questioned. And I also think about this in terms of him managing the group, but also managing the funds.
Yeah.
And I think that they kind of talk about this a little bit. Mismanagement of funds too. And then when Kevin, it's Kevin, right?
Mm-hmm.
When he says to his father, I've been adding up the money and it's not looking right. And he says something to the effect of, who are you to question me? Who are you to question my decisions? So also thinking about that, thinking about like the mismanagement, the misallocation of funds, because you are a person in power, you feel like you can take what you want, allocate it the way you see fit, and not have to answer to anyone.
Yeah, because he didn't try to deny it. He didn't try to make up an excuse for for what else it went for. He didn't try to explain it. He simply said, I can do this because I'm the boss, which is, I think, I think that is true of top-down hierarchies. If it exists and I can get access to it, then it's mine to do with however I please, no matter what.
I think there's so much to be said there too, politically, and I don't know. I'm not ready to get to that.
I know, because here's the thing about an interruption is right. If any of us who are critical media consumers witnesses or comes across what we see as an interruption, and by interruption I mean like something that throws a flag on the play and says, wait, this dominant narrative, this status quo that we take to be law of nature, basically, we don't question it. Maybe it's time to question it. It isn't our job to fully understand it at the moment. It's simply our job in that moment to identify it and say, wait, I just saw something and I need to think about it for a minute. So that's kind of what it's cool, talking to you about this, because we can go, I saw an interruption here, and then we can try to figure it out. We don't have to be right. Yeah. Take right. That pressure off of yourself.
I'm definitely gonna have to think about that one. So we talked about how you feel like Iron Claw is the braver film. What are some things that you feel Barbie gets right as we look at interrupting how we see a patriarchy and masculinity in our culture?
I think that Barbie could have fallen down in how it treated the Ken's experience in being shown their flaws. I think that Ken's we often talk whenever, for instance, when we talk about homophobia, in my LGBTQ trainings and my safe zone trainings, we talk about how homophobia also impacts straight men, cis straight men, and impacts them in limiting ways. I have not seen a lot of feminist discourse that has taken that same approach to critiquing patriarchy, of looking at it. They'll include the homophobia because that work's already been done for them, but they're not taking on looking at the limiting effects patriarchy has on not men, let's say maleness and masculinity.
Maleness.
Yeah. As a social component or whatever. So, for instance, if I'm a guy and I want to be respected and accepted by other guys, and I'm in a workplace, I have to behave a certain way, even if I don't feel confident in my ability to behave that way or to sustain it or whatever. That's an expectation on maleness under patriarchy. Careerism. I am expected to want to become a director one day, and I'm like, I think I'd be a bad one. I can't manage a budget. But that doesn't matter because I'm expected. There's something wrong with me in the workplace if I don't want to be someone who is promoted or moves up the corporate. So it's nothing on the level of I'm terrified to walk alone at night. And so I think because of that, we don't examine it, because it's sort of like, what's the point? What good comes of examining something that isn't as big of a danger? But there could be value in examining those things, because if we want these folks to align with us in the work of feminism, we have to be able to incorporate their point of view, or they're not going to listen to us.
Kind of goes back to the insider outsider thing.
Yes, exactly.
Was this supposed to be depressing? When we said we were going to do this, I just kind of feel it's like heaviness.
Okay.
In this conversation.
I know. Sometimes that happens whenever you learn something.
Yeah.
And by learn, I mean like when you teach yourself something, or when you have this thing for the first time, this idea for the first time. I don't know. I don't want to be depressed over it, and I don't want you to be, but it is also sort of a consequence of seeing interruptions. And I think
Yeah.
that's why people who study film or media or anything like that, they have really broken senses of humor, and
Mm.
they like really weird stuff.
Yeah.
Which is
So personally, I have been feeling a lot of a lot of this as we interrupt. And one of the things I told you about me, I'm so analytical and I can send myself down a rabbit hole. So thinking about some of the things we've talked about recently and some of the things that I have felt personally, like leaving a situation and wondering if I was treated a certain way
mm,
because I'm black, because I'm a woman, or because of both.
yeah,
And then what the larger implications of that. I have really just been thinking about the future of politics in the United States. I don't know, for better or worse. And, I also think about this. So we didn't talk about this when we talked about The Last of Us, but there's a scene in episode 3, which is our favorite episode, when Ellie and Joel are walking, and um Ellie asks what happened, and Joel is like, "Oh, I thought you went to school." Ellie was like, "It was a bad one," and they don't want to talk about why a shitty government couldn't prevent a pandemic. And I never unpacked that.
yeah,
Still haven't unpacked that. So I don't know. I just feeling like this interruption is taking place on screen and it's taking place off screen too.
yeah.
So
I it, there are things that I'm struggling with when it comes to media that are created about what's happening to me.
mhm,
Um, I don't like to watch queer films that much anymore.
mhm,
Not because and I'm picky about them. I guess I'll put it that way. I There's a lot of folks, especially young people, for whom that kind of stuff is really great. It's empowering. We need it for them. I don't, because my experiences aren't in there. I'm too old, and I really have a hard time with transition narratives and stuff like that because I just don't like being shown someone else's experience of my experience. And I don't know if that's normal or not, but the pandemic, the media that came out in the pandemic and that was in some way related to its contemporary context is hard for me to watch. And The Last of Us was different in that way
mhm,
to me. It was like it was still its own thing, and it wasn't looking straight at me. I'll tell you one time period of and genre of media I can't stand is the Trump era media, like reaction to Trump, the protest media and stuff. um I'm thinking, so American Horror Story is a good example of that. The ending is very much like, but don't worry, we'll all band together and it'll be okay. And it's like, that's not what's going to happen. Nobody's going to fucking save you. This is it. It's not. It's not band together and overthrow the government. It's survive this and then heal. And nobody told that story. Nobody wanted to tell that story. They wanted the instant gratification of being able to say, it's okay, it'll be over tomorrow. And that's not how this shit works.
mhm. Yeah.
But when we first started talking about doing this, you had talked about your experiences um, as someone who was living through the Black Lives Matter
Mhm,
organizing, and how, I mean, the things that happened to trigger that, George Floyd, and going all the way back to Tamir Rice happened very close to where I was living. I was in Ohio at the time, and Mike Brown, and it was like
Trayvon Martin.
Trayvon, yeah, and then all the way up to, it was like Kyle Rittenhouse was just another layer, right? It was his reaction to our reaction, and of course it was an escalation. looking for interruptions. Do you know of any? Can you think of any interruptions around that in film?
I don't necessarily, I can't necessarily think of any interruptions in film, but I know that on television, it seemed like during that time, every television show had a Black Lives Matter episode, and every television show had a COVID episode. Whether COVID was
Yeah.
um, woven into the plot or not. I mean, but I can think of a couple of shows that I was watching during that time. So one of them was For Life that talked about the experience of a man who was incarcerated, who became a lawyer while he was in jail and working with inmates and also working on his own case to get out of jail. So
I'm thinking of there's a episode of Orange is the New Black
mm,
where they have their Black Lives Matter episode, but I it didn't annoy me in the way that some of these like other sort of one-off tokenizing episodes do because they killed the main character. It
mm,
wasn't here's a weaker show or a less full-throated, I guess, script about this would take a character we've never met before, a red shirt. This is Star
mhm,
Trek. There's a formula for doing this. They take a red shirt, kill them, and then the episode's about that. They killed Pusey, who has been one of the main cast since the beginning of the show.
mhm.
And that I remember being really impactful. But again, prison,
Yeah,
incarceration.
yeah.
This is the dominant
So
narrative tells us where black folks belong.
I I did not watch Orange is the New Black. I think I watched maybe the first
It's
season.
not very good.
But when the particular episode you're talking about came out, I heard people also talking about that too, like just in terms of interrupting how we address that as well.
Yeah.
So, I think while I think that there were also some people who may not have been happy with the way that that played out.
Yeah, I'm sure. Because, well, this isn't an Orange is the New Black podcast, but they did some things that were really weird to me that about like the guard who was the one who killed her. And like, I don't know. But you know what movie did, in my mind, make a large interruption? Was Moonlight.
Okay.
Did you see that one?
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. And
It's
the
one of
the
the best
reason
movies.
I I know my heart is going to be broken.
Oh, actually, maybe not.
Okay.
It's not exactly Brokeback Mountain. That one, I don't see any reason for you to watch Brokeback Mountain. it's it's
And I think that that's why I cried for days after Brokeback Mountain. And days. Like
yeah,
I woke up in the middle of the night like I don't want to be in this Del Mar. Like
I
just
know, I know.
just cried for days.
That was
Um
an incredible. That's the mark of an incredible film, though. It was truly just in here. We lived it. Moonlight doesn't have that kind of an ending. It in fact doesn't have any violent deaths or anything like that. It's a very unique kind of black queer story.
okay.
Yeah, but talk about an interruption. I mean, it interrupted the industry. It
Mhm.
literally interrupted the Oscars. And I was like, this is incredible. I don't know. I want to go back to you saying like, am I supposed to feel depressed? Because I don't want that to be. Maybe at first, yeah, maybe.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the reasons why so many graduate students are soulless husks. The folks in mine and Claire's department, well, they were not fun to hang out with, and they drank all the time. I mean, it's like it's hard at first when you start to look at what you're being shown and what you're being it's almost like you want to go like, wait a minute, I didn't sign up to be talked to this way, and then actually, yes, I did. I mean, that's not a fun chain of realizations. But then I think it does get easier, and you begin to sort of, the interruption is ours, right?
Yes, the
It's there.
interruption is ours. So also there's this other piece of the interruption, right? So we know that we have a space where we can say whatever we want to say. But then people who may not agree with our interpretation or how we interrupt, so it's also interesting to me that we also got to think about potential backlash,
Mm-hmm.
especially in this society, in this day and age. Where it's one thing to say, flip something on its head and have this critical discussion. But then if you have a critical discussion and you say certain things, there's potential for it to basically impact your life and your
Yeah,
livelihood.
right. And there's a reason why these kinds of things aren't for the faint of heart.
What are you
Um,
looking for?
I'm looking for this author. Her last name is Crady, but I was looking for her first name, and it's it's Marvon. Okay, wrote this essay that really impacted me. It's over 10 years old now, where she talked about how our bodies are media, and I always really liked the essay. And it always, sometimes I file things under I'll understand that later, um, and I just now put together a way in which that happens, because here you and I are two people whose body are media, right? You are a, you as a black woman, and many other things about your body. All of our bodies are this way, right? Me as a trans man, um, who is not white but has white privilege because nobody can recognize my race. Um, we like mediate all of the things that we see as we talk about them. So if I were not a trans man, just a cis white dude, that would mediate the things I'm saying differently. So each interruption that we observe and interpret and then say is then it's kind of branded by us. I think that's why these, like what you were just talking about, the like saying these kinds of things, they do become so personal,
Mhm.
especially if folks don't like it.
They do. They are personal. And it's like, you can't tell me how to interpret my lived experience, right? Like as an outsider. So, like the going back to the example you were talking about somebody telling your friend that they're being discriminated against. So, like microaggressions. The idea behind microaggressions are like death by a thousand cuts. There are all these, little incidences that over time they add up. So it could be that that particular day, I don't want to fight for my life. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to address this thing. I choose to let this slide because this that's the only way I can cope in that moment. I don't want to address this right now because I am barely holding it together. So when I think of those things, it makes me think about how those things add up over time. So then for us to sit here and have these conversations, and then someone says, well, that's not your experience. Who are you to tell me what my experience is? You know? Or I disagree. I don't see things that way. But this is the way I see it,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like we have freedom of speech until you don't like what I'm talking about,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So it's just
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, and that's a really good point. I think for someone who does not experience the kinds of cuts, that, let me go back. So for someone trying to explain to someone who receives 1,000 cuts a day that they just
Hmm.
received a cut,
Hmm.
they don't know about the 1,000 tiny cuts.
Hmm.
And so they have no idea that whatever they just described to this person doesn't compare to the things that they deal with on a daily basis, hourly, even sometimes, depending on where they are. And so they think they're being helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you ignore it, or you don't respond the way they want to, or you don't like give them applause or something, then we're being ungrateful. My sister is married to a man who I really like. He's a very good guy. He's a good partner, and he's a good father. His family, though, is extremely conservative Trump supporters. They virulently and loudly hate all queer people, but especially trans people. There, for some reason, I don't know why, there's a lot of people who are just obsessed with us. Like, these folks think about my gender more than I think about my gender. And she had to go to a baptism or something with them this past weekend. And she said she was just sitting there listening to them go on and on and on, mocking trans people. And I think she feels bad about not challenging them, or not, doing this or that. Or I hope she doesn't, because I hope she would know that I don't want her to make trouble in her life over these people that she will probably never see again. And they don't hurt me, because I have experienced much worse. But she needed to be expressly told this, because she didn't want to let me down, or blah, 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 blah. And so I do understand that there's pressure on folks to want to do the best that they can. And so maybe somebody who says, you're being discriminated against, thinks that they're doing what we want. I need you, when I tell you that that is not what I asked you to do, to shut up instead of getting offended. That's step 2, right? When I tell you you did the wrong thing, you misunderstood the assignment, that's okay. You need to be able to go, whoops, sorry. Okay, I misunderstood. I won't do it that way again. Because meaning well and doing well are not the same thing. But I guess, I don't know, this conversation is not going. I didn't have any expectations for what this would be like, but this is it's going to be one of my favorite conversations I've ever had.
Really?
I don't know. It's just, just a peek behind. I don't have a lot of friends, really, and I certainly don't have a lot of friends that I get to talk to very often. All of my friendships are long distance, and we talk, once or twice a month. And so, and the people I work with, I don't want to risk having these kinds of conversations with. And then also just to have someone who's as generous of a listener and communicator as you are, and also just with such different experiences than me. I don't know. Maybe nobody else would want to listen to us talk to each other, but
Maybe somebody wants
maybe.
to. I have been doing so much thinking, and doing so much thinking on top of watching Barbie, on top of watching Iron Claw. Some of the things that I've been thinking about around those two shows was like throwing around in my head this whole idea, the thing that we talked about. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning when we started. Who was nominated for an Academy Award and why?
Mm-hmm.
And or our suspicions for why not? And how we can hear critiques on masculinity from Ryan Gosling as Ken, which is camp, but we can't hear it from Zac Efron as a character who is loving and sweet and innocent, and also confronting masculinity, toxic masculinity. So it's just really interesting to me, and I don't know, maybe, if on our wish list of people we want to interview one day, maybe somebody from the Academy will come and say, that's not why.
Yeah, come and correct
Better
me.
the better performance was, maybe. But, I'm really interested. I've really been thinking about that, because it amazed me that the Iron Claw wasn't nominated for anything.
Yeah.
When you think about the performances, when you think about the imagery, how they showed but not told us
Absolutely.
things,
Yeah.
it was just It's a beautiful film, and I appreciate you putting that on my radar because I don't know if you know this about me yet, but if I get something in my head, I'm not gonna do it. Like I wasn't gonna watch The Last of Us. I wasn't I wasn't planning on watching The Iron Claw. Look, I actually waited till I absolutely had to watch it and then loved it. So
I wasn't gonna watch The Last of Us either until, um, like when you first approached me about recording, and I was like, because I thought I knew. I was like, oh, it's about the pandemic. It's gonna be too dead on, and it wasn't, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, we have
mm,
to. There is great value in, you know, allowing ourselves to be stretched in some ways.
yeah.
But so yeah, those two movies are what sort of stuck out to me as things had that I could identify as interruptions, and they kind of related. So I
Hmm.
told you that I would like you to pick our next films,
Hmm.
and you don't have to use my methodology at all. But
Hmm.
I would like to know how you would like to proceed from now.
So my research is on African American families. And originally, I started doing research looking at the experiences of Black women with master's degrees and higher and their dating experiences in predominantly white marriage markets. So I was living in Ames, Iowa. Ames, Iowa was 3% African American, I think 89% white. So, like, looking at what dating experiences are like for women in that environment. And as I got deeper into the literature, one of the things that I was guided to understand with working with my major professor, my advisor, was that that's not where the gap in the literature was. There were other places where I can contribute to research on Black families, but I still have that passion looking at the experiences of Black women.
Yeah,
So I was watching Shirley, and I was really kind of taken by this underlying message about how we view women, Black women, who who want to interrupt things,
hmm
and, what those messages say to us individually and what they say to others. Like,
and
there's,
Shirley.
oh,
Sorry.
I was just going to say, there are interactions between Shirley and her family, Shirley and her husband, Shirley and friends, and I really think Shirley is somebody she mentors. It's just, I don't know, coming from it from that perspective, looking at um Black women who interrupt is
Shirley
really.
definitely did too. Shirley
Mhm,
Chisholm is. I think that there are quite a few folks who couldn't tell you what she is famous for
mhm,
and have never heard of her, and that's because of white supremacy. That is
mhm.
because of um, whiteness writes the books on history, and
Mhm.
so Shirley is an interruption, and then a film about Shirley is certainly an interruption.
And Diane Carroll. So I love Diane Carroll. Seeing her, so first of all, growing up in an era where I didn't see a lot of Black women on TV,
Mm.
but I saw her in Julia. Like, I would come home from school, Julia would be on. And then on Dynasty, she was fierce in Dynasty, like, loved her. And look, she could go toe to toe with Alexis and all these other people and just absolutely loved her. But to learn some of her experience, like her role in Shirley Chisholm's run for president,
Huh.
is amazing.
Yeah,
So that's where I want to go next.
Shirley.
Shirley. And then I want to see Origin.
Yeah,
So thinking about powerful Black women in the film industry, Ava DuVernay, and also Regina King. Like, I would kind of like for us to pair Origin and Shirley and kind of have a discussion about those two films.
I think that that will be a very productive discussion from like a across time kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing too. Like where are
Mm-hmm.
we now versus where we started and stuff like that, which
Mm-hmm.
is something we didn't really get to do with Barbie because Barbie's not real. I mean, we did a little bit, but not in a very real way. I love that idea. I can't wait. I haven't seen either of these films, so I'm really excited to see them both. Um,
Before we go,
yeah,
are we wrapping up?
yeah, probably need to. I'm going to be sitting here in the dark here in a minute.
Okay, okay. As we wrap up, are there any things about Barbie or Iron Claw that we didn't mention that you want to pull out?
Um, well, so we didn't talk much about the formalist elements of Barbie, but I don't know that they were that important, but they were so strong. Like Barbie, so we talked a lot about camp. Um, we didn't really show our work on why we decided that it was camp. And so a lot of the things about Barbie that really signaled its tongue in cheek campiness were the technical elements, like its color, its
Mm-hmm.
use of mixed media, its use of it was recorded. Some of the scenes were recorded on sound stages, and some are recorded to make it look like Barbie's playhouse and stuff. And so, and why camp was an important decision for the film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's sort of like why are so many why are um so many stand-up comedians folks with minoritized identities now. It's like we're allowed to tell you our experiences if we're joking. So the different format.
Oh, that's another thing I'm gonna have to process. Goodness, Vern.
I'm sorry. There's actually a video I watched recently that I might have to send you because it even made me think, and it was about comedy and stand-up and stuff. But no, I can't really think of anything.
One thing that I wanted to mention about Iron Claw before we go is throughout our conversations, like, and we'll continue to talk about how I've been watching TV different, how I've been watching media different. When I watched Iron Claw, I was watching, understanding that they knew the movie they were making, and they knew who their audience was. And I also felt the same for Barbie, like as we talk about this idea that it was camp.
Hmm.
So there was that scene where Kevin and his wife have their first date,
Mm-hmm.
and we talked about this in the last episode where um he's talking about his goals, how he wants to get ahead. And I'm thinking to myself, well, it's fate. And the character says that on screen. And I'm like, oh, she's in my head. Like, she knows. Like, for me, that signal that the people who made this movie knew who their audience was. They knew the things that they would be thinking. They knew the things that
Oh,
they would take away.
that's a really good point because Barbie being camp, Barbie knew the creators, Greta Gerwig and all of them, they knew that their audience would be predominantly women and queer folk,
Hmm.
or just anyone with any kind of like marginalized status. That's who would be drawn to that because that's who has classically or historically identified with Barbie. And
Hmm.
so they don't need to sit us down and very earnestly and seriously tell us about ourselves. But the Iron Claw was drawing an audience that needed a softer hand. That's a good point.
Yeah. So between the two, do you have a favorite? Probably not the question you should ask a media studies person.
Between Barbie and Iron Claw, here's what I can tell you. If I
Okay.
had to watch one tonight, I'd watch Iron Claw because it
I
just
would watch
makes me
Iron
feel
Claw.
better.
Yeah.
Barbie is a
Yeah.
lot of fun. If I want to giggle and not have to, um, worry about how I'm going to feel after it's over, then I'll watch Barbie. But if I'm chill for the night and I'm okay being a sobbing mess, and then I would rather watch Iron Claw at this moment, just because of what it says to me. What about you?
I would pick Iron Claw. And I would pick Iron Claw because I want to dissect these relationships anymore. I mean, and some
Yeah.
more. Like the relationship researcher in me is so rich.
Yeah.
And rich in ways Barbie wasn't allowed to be.
I agree.
You know,
Camp can be very restrictive.
Yes.
It can be a little one note.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm so glad you liked Iron Claw because when I watched it, I was like, Ebony would love this movie. It has, especially when I found out that you liked wrestling, because I already knew about your research interests and stuff, and I was like,
oh, I loved it so much. Maybe we can get Ric Flair to come on.
I'm sure. Well, all right, I
You think
need
about the
to hop
portrayal.
off of here and turn on
All
some
right.
lights in this house.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm really glad that we got this debrief session. I started out feeling a little sad too when we first started talking out, but I'm feeling better now.
Okay.
Are you feeling better?
Oh, I think I'm gonna just. No, I'm not feeling better. I'm not feeling better.
Okay. Maybe you should watch something that will make you feel better.
The Last of Us.
There you go.
I feel like that's so whatever, but okay.
I'm so excited. Thank you everybody for sticking with us as the sun goes down and we unwrap our feelings. Join us next time when we watch Shirley. Guess we should say goodbye. All right. Thank you. We're so bad at this.
We are bad. We're bad, but we're like good.
Let me tell you how my editing approach so far has been to sort of play with the fact that we're not very good at podcasting right now, and that's okay.